Good afternoon, everyone. Before we start, I would like to thank my very esteemed panel here in taking time to share with us some progress that Singapore has made in maritime innovation in decarbonization. Just now, Andrew has shared with us that over the weekend, Singapore has been announced as a top maritime center. And I sincerely believe that this is not an easy feat at all. A lot of people have said that it takes a village to raise a child. In this case, I think it takes an entire system to even make this a fantastic achievement, right? So without further ado, I will invite Kenneth to comment on this, right? Kenneth, in 2022, Singapore has released a blueprint in maritime decarbonization towards 2050, outlining 7 key focus areas, and MPA has committed 300 million in these investments, right? Could you share some key highlights on the projects or initiatives that you think could be a breakthrough or a large step forward towards this agenda?
Thank you, Amy, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much on your encouragement of Singapore retaining the top IMC. And I think that's really tribute to all the industry partners. It's really the ecosystems, right? So, in fact, there's many of the stakeholders here will be important stakeholders to continue to drive Singapore up the value chain. The blueprint that we have launched, actually, for the Decarbonisation Blueprint was in response to the net zero target that our Deputy Prime Minister Lawrence Wong set for Singapore late last year. And to do that net zero, actually how we view the decarb blueprint is between the domestic and the international, right? So as my chief executive always told me that if the whole world have ICAO, IMO to look after air and sea, and every country looks after the land, then we have an overall carbon footprint of the whole global landscape. So at the global level, I think the IMO already have set the revised target. I think that was good news to many. I hope it's good news because it has set the clarity of the targets, both at 2050, 2040, 2030. So now it is about getting action done. And to do that, I think we have 2 staff in London office, which is playing the role of a vice chair for MEPC, as well as the chair for a strategy group. So I think Singapore will want to play an important role, an active role in the IMO level to influence at the UN level. And then at the domestic level, I think this is where you mentioned about the 7 areas, including the port, the Harborcraft communities, the talent piece, the finance piece, research piece, innovation piece. So many of these are the blueprint in which we will work with the various stakeholders to achieve the net zero target. One important stakeholder must be the financial stakeholders, because 300 million actually to many of the bankers here might be a very small sum of money. Caroline will tell you that actually we need a lot more, right? Because yeah, this 300 had to cover infrastructure, you had to do all the trials, you had to do all the build-up. So what we have done really is to only kickstart and catalyze this whole movement about electrification of Harborcraft, to get it and then to build up the charging stations around Singapore so that the electric Harborcraft can work. We have actually launched many initiatives to support the electrification of Harborcraft, the expression of interest for better design, for charging stations, and we also have pour-in research funds to get electrification, batteries, and we have consortium in the industry that readily step forward, and the banks also have come forward to look at financing as well as insurance. So I think the Harborcraft sector is one big area we want to work on. For shipping, then that is where a lot of support is required because Singapore is a bunkering hub. So this year, July, we have done the methanol trial with Maersk. In August, we have the CISO Frontier, which is a hydrogen vessel that comes to Singapore as well. End of the month, we will likely see the wind sail vessel coming to Singapore. Many of these required preparation so that the operation, the bunkering, safety aspects can be looked after, as well as making sure that all the community get comfortable with all these new technologies, and discussion then can happen. I think I can go on and on, but I think I'll just stop here, but to have others to have more airtime as well.
No, absolutely. Kenneth, you have given us a very good glimpse of what are the stuff that MPA has been doing. I'm sure you could, there's a lot more to go, right? Maybe I move on to Caroline here. Coming back to the blueprint again, I believe a lot of us would like to hear a little bit more about that. And with SSA representing a wide spectrum of shipping companies and the shipping ecosystem, we talked about ecosystem earlier. What is SSA's role in this journey? And what are the sort of short, medium, and long-term objectives that you would like to achieve?
If I just for the benefit of those who do not know Singapore Shipping Association, we are an association of 500 members, and out of the 500 members, I have 270 members who are ship owners, ship managers, ship operators, ship agents. Then I have 220 members who are the maritime service providers that supports the ship owners, ship managers, ship operators, ship agents, like the classification societies, the bankers, the insurance companies, the other service providers. So it is indeed an ecosystem. And really, since 1985, we came in, and this ecosystem has built upon itself. The success has been built by my predecessors, and we continue to do what we can. So then, SSA, Singapore Shipping Association, is also a member of the Federation of ASEAN Ship Owners Association, and we are also members of the Asian Ship Owners Association, as well as the International Chamber of Shipping on the global level. So we do have a very comprehensive overview of the whole maritime industry, especially with SSA active participation. So with all these, that we really have a sense of the ground of what is happening to our ship owners, then what do we do as a shipping association to make sure that our owners' interests are promoted, are protected? And SSA also have another pillar, is that we must make sure that Singapore remains a leading maritime center of the world, because that will only ensure the businesses and the jobs for our people. So it's quite a whole ecosystem. We have very clear missions to accomplish. So when we talk about short term, these are our immediate challenges, and we will always voice the concerns and the challenges of the industry to my counterpart, not my counterpart, but my regulator, the MPA. We are very robust, and we thank MPA for that, treating us as a valued partner. So people talk about COVID, but really in COVID-19, we came together and we really shared our very robust views and concerns to the regulator, and the regulator listened to us, and they try to fit us in with the whole of nation challenges. So I think that's where we work very closely. So now that the COVID is behind us, how do we bring Maritime Singapore even further? So the short-term challenges for SSA is really about educating our companies, especially the smaller and medium-sized ones, on the Scope 3 emissions, on what are the digitalization capabilities that you can to actually bring down your emissions. And then we do have actually about 16 startups with SSA. It was very intentional to admit them as a member with a very low fee, because we want to connect these startups and their solutions and bring that problem statements from the industry, so it's a vice versa. So this is the short term. What are the technologies available? What are the solutions out there? how do you actually calculate your data, you analyze your data on your emissions? We are trying to bring that awareness and the education to our members. Then we talk about short-term to mid-term, really then is about participating on a global level, making sure that our voices are heard on global fuel standards. I think Singapore is very well placed to be a standard setting bearer. We are very established in the way we do standards. So I think we can contribute in that part. And then the alternative fuels, of course, because Singapore is the biggest bunkering port, we have to be there. So we have to make sure what are the alternative fuels available, what are the safety standards required. We make sure that we have the infrastructure to be able to carry those fuels for our ships. So this is the part where the industry will learn about the alternative fuels and share with the wider members network. So then we talk about long-term global fuel standards. Also, we want to be a voice that in order to push the net zero, the carbon tax has to come in. So, but how do you collect these funds and make sure that it's also channeled to the developing countries? And they also have a stake in this decarbonization because it is going to affect them more than the developed countries. So we need to bring them into the system. And I think that's where SSA being in ICS has a role to play. Then, of course, we need to have the financiers to come in because, as we said, we need the financiers to come in to actually finance this decarbonization journey. So I'm just going to bring in one more point because you all are all in finance. So I just want to bring in one more point is that at the end of the day, I mean, in the past, the financial institutions has always been a support structure. And that is the shipping industry tells them what we need, and then they give us the solutions. However, it has changed because the financial institutions now, they have their ESG policy and they can only finance green ships. And so they are imposing those conditions on the shipping industry. I'm not saying that it's wrong, but I think there has to be a lot of dialogue between these two sectors to discuss and to come up with a matrix that works for the ship owners as well as for the financial institutions. Thank you.
Excellent, Caroline. I've been hearing a couple of keywords there: ecosystem, financiers, bankers. Please listen on. I think in this maritime innovation, we've heard from the public sector. I think it cannot be done without the private sector. So coming on to Eirik and Anis a little bit later. So Eirik, you have a new identity here. And we talked about a while ago, you are leading Yinson Greentech, and the company has launched the Marine EV brand earlier this year with an aim to deliver a clean and integrated technology enhanced ecosystem to support net zero transition in the maritime industry. What exactly does this mean? Back to the blueprint, we spoke a little bit about out of the 7 focus areas. What are the projects that you've been doing in Yinson?
Thank you very much for that introduction. I think for us in Marine EV is saying we believe in the marine sector going electric. We believe in Harborcraft becoming electric. We think the great thing about short sea shipping, about Harborcraft, inland waterways, nearshore shipping, it's going to be electric. We don't have that fear of long distance shipping where is it going to be ammonia, is it going to be methanol, is it going to be hydrogen, what kind of powertrain are we building up there, or biofuels? For Harborcraft, it's going to be electric. It's very simple. It's like for cars, buses, trucks, they'll all be electric. I think no one's talking about hydrogen anymore. Everyone's forgotten about that already. And that's great, because that means we can act immediately, and that's what we're doing. So we're already building the first 2 fully electric Harborcraft for Singapore, and we're going to be launching both of those before the end of this year, and we're really looking forward to doing that. And obviously that's very much in collaboration with the support from the MPA, from SMI, from the whole of the Singaporean ecosystem. But I'd say, obviously of the pillars there, Harborcraft is key for us. But I'd say, the targets being set at the moment, 15% reduction in total emissions by 2030, an additional 50% by 2050, that's too low to keep Singapore at the forefront of the technological innovation. I mean, it's got to be at least 50% by 2030 and 100% by 2050. With the current targets, we're going to fall far behind everyone else, and I don't think Singapore wants to do that. So we're here to help, the MPA and everyone not just reach those targets, but greatly, greatly exceed them. And I think with the technologies we're developing, the technologies available as well, that's doable, but it will need the support of the whole of the ecosystem. And that's why there are two other key pillars that we're working with. One is obviously R&D, working with, for example, SIT and TCOMs here in Singapore, working on digital twins, working on product development, working very closely with the Singapore Ship Association as well, because together we need to work to enhance the standards and make it possible to scale. And again, that's where I'm coming from, a larger company. We're basing our Greentech division here in Singapore. And we want to make it possible to work with the banks, work with all the financiers to create a large enough ecosystem to make it financiable. Because it's very easy to say the banks have to finance this, but we also have to give them a product, we have to give them a structure which can be financed. And I think that's also where we can bring a knowledge to the table and a capability to put the whole of the ecosystem together. But again, we want to be at the forefront of this. We've taken the risk of building two highly innovative electric boats. One is going to be a hydrofoil, one is a large cargo vessel, and it's just going to be exciting to launch those here. And by the way, we're making both of them autonomous ready for the future as well already now, because we have to, as so many people have said today, we have to not just think about the technology, but how we can develop it and how the operational capabilities, the safety aspect can be brought into this as well. So, and I'm glad to hear earlier today, I think all of us on the shipping side, we're kind of ahead of the regulators, we're ahead of the IMO, we're ahead of the Singapore authorities a little bit as well. And we're saying, come on, push us to go even faster. This can be done even better. But I think there's nowhere better to do this than in Singapore. And, I think it's a really, really exciting time for all of this happening.
Thanks, Eirik. I think it's really good to hear that in terms of domestic shipping, we do not need to think about too many options. If electrification could get us there, I think it's fantastic, right? To you, Anis, from Seatrim perspective, and with your experience, I know that you have a lot of experience in the engineering space, maritime engineering. Your deep engineering capabilities, what do you see the gaps and opportunities in this area, and how does Seatrim positioning yourself for it?
Thank you, Amy. Thank you for the introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting us to this panel. Seatrim, all of us may not know who Seatrim is. So I will just say a few words about Seatrim first. Seatrim was established this year in February of this year and came out from Sembcorp and Keppel Offshore and Marine. So it's basically a merger between Sembcorp Marine and Keppel Offshore and Marine, and with a big pipeline of projects with both the companies, with our footprint spread around the world. Although we are a local Singapore company, we do not have a single client in Singapore. So we work for our clients worldwide, and we consider ourselves as a solution provider to our clients. The solutions that we provide, of course, demand decarbonization and transition to zero shipping. And in that context, we of course work with Singapore agencies such as MPA, GCMD, IMDA, Energy Market Authority, and so on. The idea for us is to, before we approach the banks for financing our projects, of course we have to pilot the projects and prove their viability, prove their scalability. And in that respect, we work with the agencies in Singapore to pilot the projects. And fortunately for us, we have a very supportive agencies here. GCMD is financing one of our pilot projects. MPA is doing it for another project. And we see that continuing until we have a technology that can be viable, scalable, and is acceptable to the industry in terms of its economic viability. Before we go into details of this, I think somebody mentioned about data sharing. And the data sharing comes only once we have the data. And to establish that data, we have to carry out these pilot projects so that sharing of these data across the industry players is possible. And to that extent, I think the different industry players with different kind of ship profiles and different needs will have different solutions. And there's not one solution that fits all. And in that context, I think we have to combine and aggregate all these pilot projects and see how we can help the industry transition into the zero carbon fuel by IMO requirements of 2050. In terms of our footprint, we are actually progressing with projects which in the past we had mostly oil and gas projects, and currently our order book actually consists of 40% of the projects which are based on renewables. And these come from around the world in European waters, in US waters, and those are mostly substations, electric substations. These are basically aggregating electricity from the wind turbines which dot the European waters and the US waters. And once the electricity is collected into these substations, then they transmit it to the grid, basically. And that actually consists of about 40% of our portfolio. And going forward, we intend to take part in the wind turbine demonstration projects again until the wind turbine is demonstrated to be viable. I think the clients will not come to install those wind turbines. So in that respect, we are working with clients towards making the projects viable, as well as demonstrating the viability of these future projects.
Thanks, Anis, for that. Since we have left for 5 minutes, I'll just quickly go through a little bit across the public and private sector, I would say here. Back to you, Kenneth. I know that you have called for interest for proposals for the Harborcraft. Deadline was 15 September. Do you have any teasers for us about how the proposals look like?
We have received, 2 weeks ago, we just sent it, and we have very good submission from the industry, very encouraging, but we will be letting the industry know what are some of the outcomes very soon. The charging infrastructure expression of interest is ongoing. Just to let everyone know, we are thinking of issuing expression of interest for the financial sector to get financial and insurance to respond to how to support the electrification of Harborcraft. I think as we dialogue with many bankers and insurance, we know, well, first I start to learn the word bankable, right? You must be bankable. And then the other thing that we learned is there a use case? Is there proven records? Insurance are also looking at, past cases. But if you come to a new technology, that is where we all need to work together to cross the hump, because there's no really track records in the Singapore context. How then do you assure all your investment committee that this is a bankable assets and all that? Is about coming together, trial, go and visit Yinson, see the actual craft, go to CTRM, talk to SSA and many other stakeholders to find that data point to substantiate that. I think that is important steps I encourage all to take. Even as an agency, we start to see a lot more collaboration. Shipping and energy suddenly starts to blend and the lines start to blur. MPA starts to work very closely with EMA to issue ammonia for both electricity as well as for bunkering. So that kind of work is ongoing, as well as MPA and MAS. MAS currently there's an ongoing dialogue for shipping as well. So I've sent some of the colleagues there to hear what are some of the advice that they could give to us as well. So I think the whole of Singapore government is behind this whole hydrogen blueprint, whether it's electricity, whether it's for decarbonization, and we want to come together with the banking sector to work.
Thank you, Kenneth. Eirik, you have signed a couple of MOUs recently, on track to launch Hydro Mover by end of this year. Tell me one challenge. Would it be financing or would it be something else?
I think there are a few challenges, but I think the key is getting some clear direction, and a little bit of support would be helpful as well on just being a little bit braver on saying, for example, all new vessels, as has been done for buses, have to be zero emission from next year for Harborcraft. We can do it right now. We don't have to wait. So I think, that kind of a little bit of some of the support that's going on is very, very good, but some of it's a little bit hesitant because, when we're saying, oh, we'll look at this for a few more years, we're going to discuss this, it's a little bit, should we do it or shouldn't we do it? But we're going to go ahead anyway. And that's why we're building, launching our 2 electric vessels this year. And then we're working with 7 of the key operators in Singapore who operate more than 200 Harborcraft today. And the demand is there. Everyone wants to go electric. So we want to start scaling this next year. And I hope that we could replace as many as 500 Harborcraft with purely electric vessels by 2030, and the remainder by 2035. I mean, this is the kind of speed we want to talk about on Yinson's side. And I think, again, we're going to run ahead of the regulators. We're going to push them to come with us and see how fast we can do this together and make this a real successful story for Singapore.
Thanks, Eirik. I think let's just go 2 sentences each to just go around the table, starting from Anis. In one sentence, how would you say success look like to you in the maritime innovation in the decarbonization space? How does success look to you?
I don't think we should rest on our laurels. Success would come when we have completed our task of decarbonization, and that's far, far away. So we have to continue to push and seek solutions which would bring about this transformation. For example, in our wind turbine installations. So far, the wind turbines have been installed near shore. They were on fixed foundations. Going forward, because nobody wants these turbines back in their backyard, right? And we need to go further deeper to get higher wind speeds. And to do that, you need to prove these into actual conditions. And that would take time. So once we go into floating offshore wind turbines, that would be a big challenge, and that would take a few years to mature. So, as I said, we need to keep working towards maturing new technologies and in order to achieve this zero carbon.
Yeah, keep pushing. It is Kenneth.
To be able to go back home and tell your kids that what we are all doing is meaningful and impactful for their generation.
Absolutely. It's always for the next generation, right, Caroline?
Yeah, so just to build upon that we need to do this for our future generations. So one gentleman from Citibank, Michael Parker, said in one round table when I was president, and he said, 1.5 degrees is 1.5 degrees. You are not allowed to go beyond that. So we have a target, and we have to achieve that target. And how do we achieve that target? I say this many of times. The ship owners needs to come in, the charterers needs to come in, the financiers need to come in, the government needs to come in. All hands on deck. And that's how success would come. Thank you.
Success with no compromise. Eirik.
I started Yinson Greentech and Marine EV because I saw all the black smoke from the Harborcraft in the Singapore Strait. So if I get rid of that black smoke, that's success. And the other part of success for me is doing that in collaboration with the Singapore ecosystem and working really together as a team to do it, because we can't do it on our own. So that's success for me.
Thanks, Eirik. We look forward to the launching later this year. And thank you all, panel. Thank you for joining us. And I would like to thank all of you.